Okay, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Irene Scott. Welcome to Virtual Accessibility, What We Have Learned So Far. I'm a program manager at Texas A&M in Education Abroad. In my role, I oversee day-to-day processes for affiliate provider programs, but I also serve as the liaison for disability resources. So I get a chance to get involved with different cases to just make students' dream happen. And I'll turn over to my co-presenter, Monica.
Hi, everybody. My name is Monica Malhotra, and I'm the program manager with Mobility International USA with the National Clearinghouse on Disability and Exchange Project, which aims to make sure more people with disabilities have access to exchange programs. And on a personal note, I'm very excited to be joining you for NAFSA Region 3. This is kind of where my roots into the international education career, my international education career began. So really excited to join all of you. And next slide. And so before we get into the more formal presentation, I wanted to go over some access tips for this session that are very relevant to the actual topic of virtual accessibility. And these are access tips using Zoom. And we just request that everybody please turn off your microphones and video until a moderator, myself or Irene, invites you to turn them on. This will make it more optimal for you to see the presenters and the ASL interpreter. If you plan to use audio, please use a quiet room or headphones is most recommended. To view the captions, you can click on the CC button at the bottom of your screen and enable the captionings or the subtitles. And then as Irene mentioned in the chat box, there's also a link for stream text link. So you can actually see the full text conversation happening rather than little snippets that come to the bottom of the screen through closed captioning. If you have a comment or question, please send a chat to myself or Irene through the chat box. And I'm going to show you the hide non-video participants feature to make it easier to get rid of a lot of clutter that you see on screen sometimes. You can go to the next slide. So with Mobility International USA, we've been doing a ton of virtual meetings, as I'm sure you all have been doing. And we've kind of mind blown when we found this hide non-video participant feature through Zoom. Pictured on the left is a screenshot of a webinar that we did with probably over 30 participants. And you can see on the left, there's a lot of black boxes with people's names or profile photos in the box and a few videos that are on. There's a lot of clutter on the image on the left, and it makes it more difficult to see the interpreters or trying to find which presenter speaking, almost like a scavenger hunt. There's a feature called Hide Non-Video Participants, and that enables the image on the right where all you're seeing is the primary presenters and the interpreters. And if you go to the next slide. So how you get there is going to any of the boxes, a person's individual screen, and in their top right corner of their box is the more icon, the ... And if you click on that, you can select hide non-video participants. So all you see is the primary presenters. And currently we've spotlighted the interpreter. So the recording will actually have the interpreter on screen, and then you should be able to see myself and Irene in addition to the shared screen. And if you can go to the top right corner of your screen and then put gallery view rather than speaker view, then you should be able to see all three of us in addition to the PowerPoint. Next slide. And Irene is going to share more about the diverse participants that we're talking about to make sure everybody has access to all of the virtual events that we're planning.
Yeah, so today we aim to provide some accessible tools on an array of different topics in an effort to equip people with what they need in order to engage all participants. So as you know, individuals participating in virtual events these days, they're coming from all walks of life. But in the virtual world, certain needs are amplified, and the most common ones here are listed here on the screen. And I'm going to go over each one of them as well as some access tips. So the first one is vision. Examples of this is individuals who are nearsighted, farsighted, low vision, or blind. Access tips that are helpful for this group include enabling auto description, silent chat during presentation, reading out loud all chats or poll results, announcing speakers or change the speakers each time, using platforms that work well with screen readers, and if there's any permanent images or graphics in the presentation, making sure you describe them. The next, uh, the next group is hearing. Example of this is individuals who are hard of hearing or deaf. With this group, access tips that are helpful include, using ASL interpreter or captioning. If you do use an ASL interpreter, one of the tips that Monica had shared earlier is making sure you spotlight them just so that they're a little bit more visible to whoever who needs that service. Reducing background noise as much as possible. One other thing you notice is that both Monica and I are using headphones and microphones that just help make the audio more clear. And also just having a point behind the scene, having a point of contact for any technical issues. And then announcing speakers is very important because that's also helped cue the captioners and the ASL interpreter of any presenter change. And then the next category is mobility. So examples of this are individuals with paralysis, loss of limb, arthritis, cerebral palsy, muscle sclerosis, and so forth. With this group, access skills that are helpful include offering key command options for engagement. If you have meetings that are super long, numbers of hours, it's good to schedule breaks like 10 minutes for every hour, and that helping lessens fatigue. And then the next group is neurodiversity. So this is actually an emerging concept, but it's a concept that recognizes just the neurological differences among people. So examples of this include individuals with learning disability, ADHD, autism, epilepsy, Tourette's syndrome, and so forth. And some access tips to be mindful for this group included just having an option to chat responses or questions, using accessible plain language, avoiding jargon, leaving time for information processing, minimizing distractions, providing an option to read out loud messages by the host. And then also, if you're using virtual background, try to use things that do not have flashing or strobing animations. And then the last group is access. And this is not necessarily always directly related to someone's disability, but it's something that we have learned just as people are working more at home or they're joining things from like whatever location remotely. And it pertains to just, it really impact people's level of being able to participate equally. So examples of this include, just having access to reliable internet, learning a new technology skill to effectively navigate different platforms, having the necessary equipment to participate. And then for this group, that's for people who might have internet limitations or access. Some alternative that's helpful for them is things like WhatsApp or like mobile messaging system. And then I'll turn over to Monica.
Great, thanks, Irene. So when we're planning virtual events, it's really important that we plan it with design for inclusion from the very beginning rather than more of a reactive measure. Some of these options could be making sure that you're finding an accessible virtual platform. With MIUSA, we've been using Zoom probably for the last year or so, and there's just so many developments. Zoom is changing often, and then there's new different platforms that keep coming up and developing. But a few considerations whenever you're deciding on what platform to use and what forms of engagement is to make sure that there's an option for computer and phone-based audio. making sure there's multiple ways for attendees to participate, not just having people complete a poll or doing the polling in the chat box, but it could be chat, it could be calling out, it could be the poll. So just having multiple ways that people can participate and engage with the presenters. Ensuring that there's compatibility with assistive technologies such as a screen reader software, and also having a method for attendees to direct chat or contact a staff for any access needs. For instance, someone could say, I can't see the interpreter, or the video's gone, or I can't hear the presenter, or sometimes the interpreters might have a question. So you just want to be able to have a direct chat function for troubleshooting any issues that might come up. And also messaging. You want to make sure that whatever event that you're planning is welcoming people with disabilities from the beginning as well. This could be different messaging for on-site events. An example could be this venue is wheelchair accessible. So that means that you've thought about inclusion and you want people with disabilities to attend your event. So what does that look like in a virtual space? Some examples could be this event will provide captions in ASL or sign language interpreting. So just noting that on the front page of your event poster or whatever, however you're advertising it, if it's through social media, emails, and you just kind of want to make sure that's at the forefront, that you are thinking about inclusion and you have integrated it into your event. We're all learning so much right now. So it's also important after the event to submit a survey to your attendees and just see how everything was. How did access go? How were the captionings? How were the interpreters? How was access met for people from diverse backgrounds? Next slide. And when we're planning these virtual meetings and events, the most common accommodations that are integrated that you'll see is captioning. And that could be real-time captioning with the stream text link, which you can see in this session. So there's a human typing and who's been assigned as a closed captioner. So she is typing everything real time. And we've also shared the stream text link in the chat box so you can see the full stream. Sometimes it's important if you turn your head for a second, if you miss the conversation, sometimes that stream text link is a little bit easier to follow so you don't miss anything. And now more and more, you're also seeing artificial intelligence captioning, AI captioning as well, integrated into these virtual platforms. I think there still needs time for technology to catch up with AI captioning. It's just, we've experienced that it's not accurate because it's just done through, automatic AI intelligence. So it's not really 100% accurate, especially in our field of international education. And so words, people's names can get misinformed, and then also it's not as reliable. There's been a few organizations where AI, you attend you're ready to set up for your meeting and then it's just not working. And so when you have people that actually really rely on captioning, this is not, it's just not working today. It's not really a good solution to providing captioning. I think we'll just have to see over time how it develops further and enhances. And I think it's great that programs are developing to integrate this into programs, but in my experience, I haven't really seen it be a reliable solution for providing captions. American Sign Language. Let me rewind. I just wanted to share one more thing about real-time captioning. In the planning stage of it, I really value that with the captioners, we're sharing more context to what this is about. So we share the PowerPoint ahead of time. We share the presenters' names so then they can accurately transcribe that information in the captions. So that's kind of building the information and resources to make sure the accuracy is met, especially for people who do rely on captions. So American Sign Language, which we're providing here in this session. And alternative formats is another accommodation that we've seen through registration forms and requests. Some people might want the PowerPoint ahead of time or any materials that will be shared through the session, emailing it ahead of time just so they can access it on their computer and whatever equipment or device that they'll be using. What does budgeting for inclusion look like? These are estimates, but real-time captioning has ranged for us from about $80 to $125 an hour. American Sign Language has been, again, probably about $100 to $150 an hour. It's also important to budget for time. As we're all learning and training ourselves and training others, it's important to give yourself time to test videos, recording, inviting the interpreter on for a test or inviting presenters on just to make sure access is met and that everybody's working on it together. The Clearinghouse recently held a Joining Hands virtual symposium, and we often set up test meetings with our deaf presenters, with our interpreters, just making sure that we're troubleshooting and practicing everything ahead of time rather than just kind of relying on one person to figure it out, because Zoom is changing on a daily basis and everything seems to be changing often. Right when you think you got it, then something changes. Another potential accommodation is certified deaf interpreters, also known as CDIs. Especially in our field of international education, you might have an event with international participants who may not be fluent in American Sign Language, but they are deaf themselves, and use sign language, but maybe not American Sign Language. Certified deaf interpreters are deaf themselves and have expertise and training on communicating using multiple modes of cues and visuals in order to communicate to broader and larger global deaf audiences. Some quick idea for limited budget. This is something that we've done recently for captioning. We actually wasn't about the budget, but just kind of last minute planning. But we had an intern with our office who's an efficient transcriber, typer, and we just created a shared Google Doc. And so she just created the captions and transcribed our full meeting over this Google Doc that we were able to share during our meeting. So this is another option with a limited budget. If you know somebody, an intern or anybody in the office that can type efficiently, then that could be, yeah, another alternative. Next slide. Okay.
I got exciting. So when advising students, one of the things that we notice is that on campus, they might be used to certain resources, but with campuses being either entirely remote or partially remote, student level of access to resources is a different reality when they're at home. So in inclusion with students advising, we try to be mindful of meeting students where they are. So a few methods to keep in mind is verifying any platform preferences. There's some examples of that could be, do they prefer to engage by email, by phone, by video chat, in person with social distancing messages. Another method is being flexible on our home options. When we were surveying some of education abroad offices, some of them were either they provide virtual meetings by appointment, in-person meetings by appointment. They might have a Dropbox for turn-in items. They have converted forms into electronic format where they can easily be routed around campuses, or they even have like a live chat option. So it's just good to just have a little flexibility. The other thing is if you're using any scheduling apps, it's good to have some sort of intake process. With the intake process, it helps with just assessing where students are in the planning process, seeing if they need any accommodation during the meeting or the appointment. Also, if you can be very intentional, especially with different any identity questions that they might have, or verifying any campus resources that they're used to using on campus, and they want to make sure they have those available to them when they go abroad, such as like disability or academic accommodations or financial constraints. So you can be very intentional. Our office has a series of like 8 or 9 questions, and it's just yeah, it just helped make the advising appointment even more richer. And then for the actual advising appointment, some tips keep in mind is using accessible language. And one example of this is something very simple, just but it's positive. Is instead of saying like if you go abroad, oh when you go abroad, and it's just a lot more positive and it engages students in the process. If you're providing like explaining multiple step process, it's good to provide a walkthrough of visual references. That's one of the things I love about Zoom is doing that screen share where I can say, okay, yeah, this is how you search for a program, or this is how you apply for a program, fill out the application. And then lastly, it's good to do a recap. So if we know people have different attention spans, and or they might only capture a few takeaways. So it's always helpful to provide a summary of any discussion points and action items. Also, some campuses might have their own portal where you can apply these notes to student records, and they can reference them at any time. And then transition to Monica.
Thanks, Irene. What I've recently enjoyed is the creativity that's come through COVID with all these different types of virtual events. And this could be MIUSA just had held a virtual career fair. I mentioned we held the Joining Hands Virtual Symposium, which had a lot of engaging sessions, a poster fair, and a disability at the movies. And there's a number of we've tabled, I guess you can say, tabled at a number of virtual exhibit booths for disability and exchange organizations. And I wanted to just hit on this as your programs look at promoting study abroad through study abroad fairs or different outreach methods that could be social media, for instance. And through social media, we use a lot of videos, dynamic images, and strong messages. And just as a reminder for these um, events or opportunities, engagement is to ensure that you're captioning videos, add alt text to any images that you're sharing, and just being cognizant that whenever you do share an image and that's the sole message, that a number of people might be missing that altogether if it's not tagged with any alt text. Providing an alternative format to any poster fairs or any events like that, which could be a Word document. And then ask for any accommodation needs if you're planning actual events such as a virtual study abroad fair. And I know we're running out of time. I think the next slide. And Irene, do you want to share about those
Yeah.
resources?
Oh, we can both. Yeah. So
Okay.
I'm gonna put this link in the chat. But we have a wealth of resources. So we're both very passionate about this topic. Done a lot of good research, and so we have a shareable Google folder with a Word doc that lists all kinds of goodies. And with the guiding principles, we just research across our field. So it has like specific resources from MIUSA, from Diversity Abroad, the Forum, NAFSA, and it goes over a wide range of topics, just good processes to keep in mind when meeting, when you're creating digital items, event planning, outreach, online learning, just in case we have any providers out there that's doing virtual and also experiences with this emerging trend. So it's just an effort of just continue to do the best we can be. This is what that document is. And then I'll turn it over to Monica if she wants to share some additional resources that's in there.
Yeah, thanks, Irene. Yeah, on this Google Sheet, there's a recent tip sheet on planning accessible virtual events that we've really learned from planning our Joining Hands virtual symposium. And then I know this might seem like a lot of information, and but I took with me saying add captions and make sure you have alt text on images, and you might be like, well, I don't even know how to do that. Well, there's this free course on Coursera, The Basics of Inclusive Design for Online Education. It's free, and it's just a very basic, really helpful course to take on demand. And it goes over adding alt text to images, adding captions to videos and YouTube, and creating accessible PowerPoints and PDFs. It's just very simple. So yeah, I encourage you and other staff in your office to take that course. And we also have a list of a few ASL and CART providers if you just want to know different names and vendors to start your search into. And then, sorry, just one more thing. We've got the Joining Hands Virtual Symposium on there, and we have all our recording sessions. So you're welcome to go to that website and just kind of look at how we integrated accessibility into those videos.
So we have a couple minutes of questions. Does anyone want to chat anything in? Also, we're curious if any of this is new or if there's a resource that was not mentioned and you'd love to share with your peers. Feel free to jot that in as well, because we'll make sure it get added to the Google Docs.
Thank you, Erin. I'm happy that was useful. And
Okay. So thank you for the positive feedback. We definitely wanted to do something timely and yeah, it's helpful. During our last few seconds, I want to share some announcement from NAFSA. So one is they have an opportunity for new professionals to join NAFSA Academy. It's a great way to get coaching and just learning more about the fields, and the deadline to apply for that is November 13th. Also, if you plan to go to the annual conference in Orlando, Florida, there is an opportunity to submit poster proposal presentation. So the deadline is December 9th. Also, NASA has a free career mapping resource, which is on my to-do list to try one day, and that's called NASA Path. So definitely check that out. And then lastly is continue volunteering with NASA. There's a lot of great opportunities locally, regionally, statewide, national, or even within different member interest groups. Okay, that concludes our session. Thanks so much for attending. Keep in touch.
thank you, everybody.